I bet you didn't know navigating today's world could be this simple. With Dunya, it can be. Greetings of peace to you all. I'm Daryl Abdullah Kirk, also known as Abdullah Hamza. My book, Dunya, A Guide for Muslims in Today's World, is your practical companion for navigating the complexities of modern life. Drawing from the Quran and the authentic Sunnah, it offers real-world insights on Islamic creed, contemporary issues, and maintaining your values. Discover how to strengthen your relationship with Allah, balance your worldly and religious commitments, and find peace in acts of devotion. Whether you're a lifelong Muslim or newly embracing the faith, Dunya empowers you to overcome challenges and contribute positively to society. Join countless others who have found clarity and inspiration in these pages. Grab your copy today from Amazon and add Dunya on your bookshelves and libraries.
If every road leads to the same summit, why do the maps disagree? And if there is only one summit, how do we find the single trail that truly reaches it? That question opens the third stage of our journey toward ultimate truth. In earlier installments, we first surveyed the religions and movements that embrace religious pluralism: Advaita Hinduism, the Baha'i faith, certain Sufi orders, Unitarian Universalism, New Age circles, and other voices that insist every sincere path will arrive at the same destination. We then examine traditions that firmly reject that notion: Orthodox Christianity, mainstream Islam, Orthodox Judaism, along with several Buddhist and Hindu schools, each arguing that truth cannot contradict itself, and that only one revelation can finally be authentic. Volume 2 ended with a promise that the next step would identify that one true path and show how we can recognize it. Before we can name any single religion, however, we need a clear grasp of spirituality itself, its roots, its evolution, and its modern meaning. For many people who reject organized religion yet refuse atheism or agnosticism, spirituality becomes the preferred alternative. They picture it as the primal, unspoiled practice of humanity's earliest communities, gentle, peace-giving, and free from the rigid structures they associate with institutional faith. The English word spirit is drawn from Latin spiritus, literally breath or life force. In biblical languages, the same idea appears as Hebrew ruach and Greek pneuma, both evoking the breath that animates living beings. By the 4th century, Christian monks were already speaking of a vita spiritualis, a life guided by the spirit rather than by worldly appetite. Centuries later, rationalist philosophers distinguished spiritual from merely material realities, and Romantic writers linked spirituality to nature, art, and profound feeling. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, theosophy, transcendentalism, yoga, and Vedanta carried the term far beyond church walls. In the 21st century, a growing number of people describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, stressing mindfulness, energy healing, intuition, and self-actualization more than institutional belonging. The word spirituality is thrown around so frequently that some treat it almost as a separate belief system, even as something superior to religion. South America, the Caribbean, and especially Africa are often cited as the go-to regions for understanding this elusive quality, and many voices present Africa as spirituality's birthplace. Yet to decide whether religion and spiritual systems are truly different, we must dig deeper. Long before European colonization, African societies lived within highly developed sacred systems. Some of those systems were world religions. Islam flourished in the Sahel and on the Swahili coast, and Christianity had already been institutionalized for more than a millennium in Ethiopia and Nubia. Others were the distinct traditions scholars today group under the label African traditional religions. Popular writers often describe those indigenous systems as spirituality rather than religion, But that contrast owes far more to modern Western categories than to African experience itself. Consider what Africans actually practiced. Pre-Islamic and pre-Christian communities possessed full-blown, communal, rule-governed sacred structures. Yoruba Ifa divination, Akan reverence for Onyame and the Abasum, Dinka worship of Nyalik, the Congo concept of Nzambi or the Ancestor Earth Shrine complex among the Shona were not loose, private spiritual vibes. They included theology, cosmology, priestly offices, initiation grades, calendars and ethical codes. Meanwhile, from the 7th century onward, Islam spread along Saharan trade routes, and by the 11th century, whole states such as Mali, Songhai, Kanem-Bornu, and the Swahili city-states were formally Muslim. In the same era, institutional Ethiopian Christianity, founded in the 4th century, remained vigorous and literate. The modern spirituality versus religion language can be misleading in this setting. Contemporary English often uses religion for creeds, scriptures, clergy and fixed institutions, while spirituality suggests personal experience, intuitive practice, and freedom from dogma. Pre-colonial Africa did not divide life into secular, religious, and spiritual compartments the way modern Westerners do, because many African traditions transmitted knowledge orally rather than in bound scriptures. Outsiders sometimes mistook them for informal spiritualities. Yet insiders recognized precise ritual specialists, taboos, cosmologies, and ethical expectations, features most scholars would call religion. Conceptually, one may still distinguish spirituality as the interior experiential dimension of the sacred, and religion as the exterior communal system of myth, doctrine, shrine, priesthood, festival, and law. In practice, though, Africans treated the two dimensions as inseparable. A diviner's personal trance, spirituality, occurred inside a lineage-approved shrine on an official market day, using consecrated objects and formulas, religion. Thus, Africans before colonization were not only spiritual in any vague sense. They practiced complete religious systems, some indigenous, some global, while experiencing spirituality inside those systems. The modern tendency to contrast religion and spirituality is largely a Western analytic tool. In lived African contexts, the two were, and often still are, woven into a single fabric of daily life. Today, despite its many faces, spirituality almost everywhere involves four shared elements: a sense of transcendence, a quest for meaning, a feeling of connectedness to something beyond the isolated self, and a hope for inner transformation. Popular culture nonetheless pits spirituality against religion with slogans. Religion is rules, spirituality is freedom. Religion divides, spirituality unites. Religion is outdated, spirituality is science-friendly. These contrasts are incomplete. Religion, far from merely prescribing rules, supplies shared worship, public service, and an ethical framework that binds communities. Its theology, law, and ritual give structure. Its scriptures and traditions give tested authority. Its goal, however described, points towards ultimate fulfillment. Spirituality, in its new Western guise, is frequently individual, eclectic, and self-selected, drawing freely on practices such as mantras, chakras, or meditation, while often discarding the historical soil from which they grew. Many scholars argue that the two dimensions actually need each other. Religion without inner life can fossilize into empty form. Spirituality without objective anchors risks drifting into self-deception. Transformation requires truth claims, statements about what is real, and moral norms, statements about what is right. Religion supplies the map. Spirituality supplies the motivation to walk it. Recognizing that complementarity prepares us to revisit the question tackled in Volume 2. Can multiple contradictory religions all be equally true? The law of non-contradiction says no being can be both triune and strictly non-triune at the same time and in the same way. Moral coherence likewise demands that mutually exclusive ethical commands cannot all be ultimate. Monogamy cannot simultaneously be divinely required and divinely forbidden. Divine justice suggests a loving creator would not leave humanity stranded among irreconcilable maps. History shows a repeated pattern of prophets proclaiming a single straight path, while later cultures, political forces, and private speculations introduce deviations. Together, these considerations point toward the necessity of one truth rather than many. I myself am a Muslim, and like anyone who belongs to a faith tradition, I do not hold it because I believe it false. No one embraces a path they consider untrue. We adhere to a tradition because we believe it answers the deepest questions of reality. If there is indeed one truth meant to bind humanity under a higher order and bring coherence out of chaos, I believe that truth is Islam, and I offer that conviction not merely as sentiment, but as a claim that invites scrutiny. Islam's foundation is Tawhid, uncompromising monotheism that resonates with what Islamic theology calls the fitrah, the innate human intuition of one creator. The Quran describes itself as both reminder and criterion, recalling earlier revelations and correcting distortions that accumulated around them. 5 concise observations illustrate why many, myself included, regard Islam as the strongest candidate for the preserved divine path. First, the Quran's textual preservation. A single Arabic text has remained unchanged for 14 centuries, corroborated by manuscripts, inscriptions, and the continuous oral chain of memorization. Second, prophetic continuity. Islam embraces Moses, Jesus, Mary, and other earlier messengers, while positioning Muhammad as the final prophet who confirms and clarifies their teachings. Third, rational theology. Islamic doctrine avoids logical paradoxes such as inherited guilt or a God-man union and insists on direct personal accountability before God. Fourth, a universal ethic articulated in the objectives of the sacred law, safeguarding faith, life, intellect, lineage and property, guides societies diverse in language, ethnicity and culture. Fifth, Islam's global and transcultural character is evident in its status as the fastest-growing faith, thriving on every continent and within every social stratum. These points are invitations rather than conclusions. They call for cross-examination through historical evidence, textual criticism and lived practice, an exploration we will pursue in the next part of this series. Spirituality without a compass may inspire the climb, but only a reliable map prevents a fatal misstep. The forthcoming segment will unfold that map in detail, examining the textual, historical and rational evidence for Islam as the preserved message of the Creator. If you are searching for a path that unites heart, mind and soul, stay with the journey, weigh the evidence and join the conversation as we move toward Volume 4.